So let's say you go to an internet forum, okay? And at the start, this forum has people who think that red is cool and people who think blue is cool, okay? And then all the people... Actually, I shouldn't use those colors because that's very politically charged. Let's say you go to a forum, and this forum has people who think green is cool and people who think yellow is cool. And for some reason, the green people are really mean to the yellow people. Wait, that also sounds bad for other reasons. God, okay. Do you think player toxicity is a game design problem? Where different player champs have too many different ways that they want to win and don't work together? I think it is a game design problem. I think certain games are much more likely to be toxic than others. So, as an example, if you play an MMO is way less likely to be toxic than League of Legends, because in an MMO, it is a cooperative environment where you're set up to like try to play the game together and win together, right? Versus in League of Legends, like a lot of things that are happening in a game like League are like cause players to directly oppose each other. So a game like League, by its nature, will be more toxic because the game design sets you up to dislike your teammates to some degree. But that said, that doesn't mean you can't solve it and you can't make it better, right? I would argue that player behavior is actually... A way that I would describe player behavior is it's kind of like actually cheating. And I don't mean being toxic as like cheating, but mainly to combat cheating in a game, you have to constantly work on it. You can't just ship anti-cheat and be like, we did it, we shipped anti-cheat, we're done. No, it's a constant back and forth. Players will find ways to cheat and you will find ways to stop the cheating. It goes back and forth, right? I think player behavior is very similar in that player behavior is in a game like will very likely be in a constant state of decay. And it's up to the devs to constantly find ways to improve it and make ways to, detect and ban and deal with players who are being negative. While on the flip side of things, constantly find ways to like really encourage positive interactions. I think it's a thing where it just has to be constantly worked on. And if it's not, it can really easily get into like fairly negative states. Would be like my evaluation of it to some degree. Do I play Deep Rock Galactic? Yeah, I did. It's really good. And yes, Deep Rock Galactic is an example of a very untoxic community. And one of the reasons so there's a lot of reasons for that, I'm sure. One of them is probably it doesn't lend itself to toxicity as much as like a game like League of Legends. But I think one thing that's really, really important to note about that game in regards to like player toxicity is Deep Rock Galactic is so unserious. Dude, you're a bunch of dwarves. You're out in space, drinking, working for a corporation. Right? You're just like, yeah, dude, we're just out here all suffering together, bro. Let's go. Right? Like, and so the entire tone of the game, like, is basically like on what you can approach it from two ends, right? Like, one is like the tone of Deep Rock Galactic is so positive and cooperative that naturally people are gonna be positive and cooperative. It's like, here, dude, I'll buy you a beer, buddy. Rock and stone, brother. Right? Like, it's very just naturally positive in that way. But then also another thing to think about with Deep Rock is just like, imagine someone starts being toxic. Like, how cringe is that? That's not very rock and stone of you, bro. Right? It's like, I guess what I'm getting at is like, on one end of the spectrum, the game just promotes positivity. It has a very positive vibe to it. And on the other end of the spectrum, because it has such a positive vibe, toxic people are more likely to feel like to end up like getting like put into a position where they're super lame and everybody knows it, right? But yeah, I think most of it actually though is just the cooperative nature and the positive vibe. But yeah, Deep Rock's sweet. Valve solved it years ago. Valve solved what? I'm curious what Valve solved. I played Dota 2 and it's fine. VC is the key to no toxicity. Bro is Cronus, if you think Dota 2 has solved toxicity by introducing voice chat, the thing I would encourage you to think about is how you might just maybe lack a little empathy, or might just maybe have a very narrow perspective. And this, by the way, again, this conversation is not whether voice chat is good or not. Dota 2 voice chat, sweet. Valorant voice chat is sweet. Honestly, I think there's a very real argument that League should have voice chat. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say. But if you have the perspective that voice chat stops toxicity in games and makes everybody nice to each other, I don't know what to tell you, man. Voice chat can have some very great outcomes, for sure, but it creates a lot of very real issues. Here's a thing to think about, okay? In regards to toxicity, that I think it's really easy to get trapped by this. Okay, so let's say you go to an internet forum, okay? And at the start, this forum has people who think that red is cool and people who think blue is cool, okay? And then all the people... Actually, I shouldn't use those colors because that's very politically charged. Let's say you go to a forum and this forum has people who think green is cool and people who think yellow is cool. And for some reason, the green people are really mean to the yellow people. Wait, that also sounds bad for other reasons. God, okay. You go to an internet forum and you go to an internet forum and it's people who like dogs and cats. There we go. Cat lovers and dog lovers. Okay, and eventually the cat lovers start getting really toxic, and they make all the dog lovers feel bad for loving dogs. And then eventually, because of this, all the dog lovers leave the forum because they're like, I'm not welcome here. Clearly, this is actually a cat lover forum, and it's not cool to like dogs over here. And so over time, because of this this pattern of behavior where cat lovers, treat dog lovers poorly, the dog lovers eventually are forced out of the forum. Okay? And then years later, a cat lover comes up and they say, hey, everybody knows that no one likes dogs. You'll notice that everybody here doesn't like dogs. Everybody knows cats are the thing because if people like dogs, they'd say so. And then they're like, and by the way, our forum is really, really positive and nice. Because by the way, the cat lovers aren't flaming each other. They're only flaming dog lovers. And they're like, we've solved toxicity. When in the reality is what they did is they chased off all the people with different viewpoints or different experiences than them. It's kind of just the idea that, like, one thing you need to be careful about is making sure that your experience you're running into isn't insulated and is actually and everybody has different experiences. And so just because you're running into an experience that like is working for you does not mean that everybody else is having the same experience as you or having an equally positive or good time. Basically, a way to talk about this is survivorship bias. So when a community is very, very negative towards certain groups of people, that community will chase those groups of people away. And then the negativity might go down. Because, by the way, the people they're being negative towards aren't there anymore, right? When a game is tuned to only be fun for a certain group of players, it's really easy to come to the conclusion that you should only make things for that group of players. When the reality could be that, like, that's a survivorship bias, where the reason you should only make things for that group of players is you chased off all the other people who might enjoy your game by only focusing on that one player type, as an example. A really easy way to think about this, actually, is games and gender in games. Very specifically, women who play games. In many parts of the games industry for many years, and this still persists to this day, right? There is this perception that only men like games, right? Or nowadays it tends to be more like only men like specific types of games. And for a lot of games, that's actually represented in their population of players. Like, a lot of games are like very high percentage men. But I have a fun statistic for you. The most popular game in the entire world, the most played game in the entire world, King of Glory, which is the phone MOBA that was like very similar and based off of League of Legends. Fun fact, it is 55% women, or at least it was like 5 years ago. That was the last time I checked that data. Back then it was still the biggest game in the world though. And so, yeah, it turns out that depending on how your game works and what you do, you can actually create, like, different games will cause, like, different groups of players. And so you could look at League in early days and say, well, hey, League is only for men because it was only had, like, you know, some small percentage of female players. But then if you look at a game like King of Glory, it seems like there are things you can do to a MOBA game to cause more people. It seems like there are things you can do to a MOBA game to make it more interesting to play for a wider variety of players, while not necessarily sacrificing its popularity. Toxicity would at least stop toxicity from causes that frustration of being unable to communicate with your team. Yes, voice chat could definitely reduce certain instances of toxicity. Like, that's 100% true. But let's take a look at Valorant as an example, right? A game that has voice chat, and voice chat adds a lot to it. Would you say Valorant has solved toxicity? Would you say Valorant, because they have voice chat, and now finally all the players can communicate with each other, finally toxicity has stopped? Certain types of toxicity are probably lower. You know, it probably is easier to communicate with your teammates. But I'll tell you right now, in Valorant, there's plenty of situations where I'm able to communicate with my teammates, and that does not stop them from using their communication to be very actively angry at other people, right? So again, I always need to keep qualifying this because I think people are constantly taking it the wrong way. I'm not saying voice chat is bad. I'm not saying League shouldn't have it. But I do think it's kind of a little close-minded to some degree to think that, like, adding voice chat to a game will solve its toxicity problems and make everybody happy, and not have, like, its own sets of negative outcomes.